Greetings, welcome to thctrust.org. Um, I am the first trustee, Tex Masson. Today I want to discuss the Constitution of the United States. I've heard, and it does appear to be true, that there is a Constitution of the United States of America and a Constitution for the United States of America. My research has provided me that if you go get a certified true copy of the Constitution from the Library of Congress or from the National Archives, you will have a Constitution for the United States of America. Now, many Moors and Moorish Americans know that Prophet Noble Drew Ali gave us a mandate to enforce the Constitution for the United States of America. That is a mandate that any indigenous American person should be doing. That is a part of your duty, your obligation, and your responsibility of one of the people. You know, anyways, I will say before I get into this in passing, if you think that you are an African American, then you are still outside of the know when it comes to nationality, birthright, and how the law works and how the law is applied. And by being outside of the know, you allow for this system of slavery that seems to be perpetuated against your people. Your ignorance and your unwillingness to get a working knowledge of what's really going on is what allows for this to exist. So I am saying that you are directly responsible because you're too busy on your 9 to 5 or it's just too complex to understand. You are directly responsible because this system needs for you to participate and not understand what is going on in order to continue to keep your people enslaved. I'm talking to the people that refer to themselves as black people, African Americans, and again, this is not to get in a whole debate of are we black people or are we not black people. I'm telling you, as your brother who studies law, I can see clearly your legal disposition and how the fraud is being perpetuated against you with your consent. Your consent being your willingness to remain ignorant. Um, but anyways, why was I get kind of giving this lecture, to my people? Well, because first off, whether you claim to be Negro, Black, Moor, or just American or Indigenous, you have to know what your status is before you understand how this Constitution trust applies to you. Because a trust has different parties. There's grantors, there's trustees, there's beneficiaries, and a trust has different parts: declarations, articles, schedules, etc. So I'm going to give you a basic explanation of how a trust works, and then I'm just going to point out the Constitution so that you can see that, oh, this really is indeed a trust, right? And then I hope it will change the way you look at it. And I'm hoping this will also make you look at yourself and figure out who you are, what is your status in relation to this contract trust, and then, through your understanding of this being one of the supreme documents, along with the treaties, along with the peace and friendship treaty between the Moors and the United States of America. So between, with those different, with that understanding, and how and what your status is in relation to those documents is going to give you a better understanding of how this whole law thing is working, including the commercial law, including the common law, right, including the estate and the trust law, right? Because that's really what it's about, understanding what our status is in relation to these jurisdictions, dimensions, and how to navigate. So first, let me give you a brief working man's overview of a trust and how it works. In a trust, the three main parties are the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. The grantor, which is sometimes called the settlor, is the one who places property, assets, or collateral, or some other form of value into the hands of a trustee to establish a trust. And the grantor always has a specific intent or purpose in mind, and it's that purpose which is why he's willing to give up property or collateral and put it in the hands of the trustee for the purpose of fulfilling that intention. And usually, what that intention is will be declared by the grantor, or he'll proclaim it, or he'll express it in the form of an affidavit. And that would be called the declaration, kind of. And it would be somewhere near, if you were looking at an actual express trust, which, or a trust written out on a piece of paper, that declaration or that affidavit of the grantor or the settlor would be somewhere early in the document. And that would kind of, again, it would be his intention or his will, the purpose for the establishment of that trust. So when you look at the Constitution as a trust, that declaration or that intention would be expressed in the preamble. And the preamble is pretty much where you're going to find the grantor. In my opinion, the most authoritative party in any type of trust agreement. It's the grantor. And the grantor is we the people, right? And some people want to argue with their own self about whether they physically put their signature on the instrument or not. And I think that's a frivolous, ignorant argument, but I'm not going to argue that with you. I know how to support my position, right? So, but what's important is in the preamble, those are the grantors or the settlors, the authoritative people, and and depending on what your status is, you can possibly be a grantor, or you may possibly be a trustee, or you may possibly be a beneficiary, because those are the three roles in the trust. And from my study and research, some of those roles sometimes can overlap. Trustees can't be beneficiaries. Trustees can be grantors. A lot of times, all three of those roles can be different. You can be various roles in that trust, but no one's going to tell you who you are. You have to research and study yourself to find out what your status is. And what I've learned as either the difference between being a black man or a Moorish American is two distinct roles within that trust. You see, in the Constitution, Article 6 basically says that all contracted engagements that existed prior to the establishment of the constitutions are still valid against the United States. And then it goes on to say that the Constitution and the treaties, and I'm specifically referring to the Peace and Friendship Treaty of 1787, the first engagement of the United States that's still active and standing. It says that is the supreme law and is still valid against the officers and the agents and the members of the United States. So that treaty places Moors in a position of overstanding, whereas in United States citizens and Negroes are in a position of understanding, because their only participation into the Constitution trust is that of a 14th Amendment citizen. And then again, you have to look at the Constitution as a trust. You have the preamble, which is the grantor's intentions and the declarations. Then you have the articles, which is the rule and the governing law. And then you have the property, which is in a regular trust indenture, you'll call that the Schedule A or the property list. But when you look at your Constitution trust, these are your amendments. So you have to think, if a Negro or a black is claiming to be a citizen by the way of an amendment, then his only claim to the Constitution is of that of an Exhibit A or an attachment or a property list or a schedule or an addendum. But it all remains that he's coming in as the property held in trust and not as one of the grantors or beneficiaries. So you have to look at that, because it means your status is off, and then all of the United States laws that you claim are so complex that you don't want to be a part of, your ignorance and unwillingness to take a look at yourself and understand your own status allows that contract to perpetuate and bind and be enforceable against you as chattel property list A, schedule, addendum, whatever. Anyways, but no, but so let me simplify that. You only got two ways into it. You're either overstanding, coming in as one of the ones enforcing the valid agreement, enforcing the contract, trust for the United States of America and your treaty. You either come in enforcing it, or you come in dangling to the agreement as property list, as one of the securities, as one of the assets secured by the trust, right? So, as a recap, the Constitution is a trust. It has a declaration, it has the articles, and it has the amendments, which is an attachment or the property list or the assets held in trust. It shows what is secured by the articles of the trust. All right, so when you look at the Constitution, the preamble, where they talk about the holding of truths to be self-evident and the affirmation of those ancient truths and principles, that is the Declaration. And the articles is the structure and the setup of the trust, identifying who the trustees are, which in the case of the Constitution, it would be all federal officers, judges, senators, representatives, everyone uh, operating supposedly under the legislation or the executive branch or the um, what is it, executive, legislative, and judicial branch of the federal government. Those are the employees and the officers, and those are the ones who the articles apply to. And the amendments don't necessarily apply to them because the amendments are that's the property that they're supposed to be securing. So when you look at it like that, it becomes apparent why uh, most of the amendments, like particularly you talk about the first 10 amendments, which is the Bill of Rights, specifically talk about rights, which in many cases may be an intangible form of an asset, but it's specifically talking about rights, not persons. And then when you get into the amendment that many of us or that many people allege to be fraud or alleged to be some type of trap or whatever you want to call it, then you get to the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment deals with uh, persons. However, it's attached to the Constitution contract as property. So again, I just kind of want to and I just kind of want to emphasize that if you do identify with being black, or if you do accept and therefore are stuck in the paradigm that your ancestors were slaves from Africa and that you are the descendant from a slave, then the only way that you became recognized under that Constitution is after the 14th Amendment, which would kind of mean everything prior to that does not necessarily apply to you, including the preamble that deals with the unalienable rights. So it's a very dangerous position, but not understanding trust and not understanding the application of law, I can see how many people will listen to what I'm saying and just dismiss it as being invalid because they can't directly see how they're impacted as a result of it. But overall, they will agree that if you look at the prison system, right, and you look at our communities, some kind of way we're impacted. And I'm just here to tell you again, it's the willingness to remain ignorant that allows the fraud, or that allows the condition to continue to exist. So if you now back to the articles, right? You know how people always say that the all the statutes and the United States codes and the acts and the policies and all of these different things only apply to the government workers and employees. Well, the reason they say that is because again, the government employees and the agents of the so-called government, if you look at it, it says from the contract trust perspective, they're in the role of trustees. That's why they have names like employees, and that's why they're officers, because a trustee is an officer of the trust, and that's what they are. So they're officers, and they're employees and agents. They are required and obligated to follow the articles of the trust, and that's the way all trusts are set up, because the grantor puts his intentions out there, and then he gives instructions, and those instructions are the guidelines. So that's why, and of course, all the trustees and the officers, they're supposed to take an oath. They're supposed to take an oath of loyalty, and that oath right there is the prima facie contract. That is the contract that shows they're bound to the trust, right? That's the contract right there. That's the proof. That's the evidence, right? So that's why they say all the laws apply to the trust, because in law, the first thing when someone's accused of something is produce the contract. So when we say produce the contract, usually those contracts are presumptions based off of citizenship, nationality, or whatever other presumption they want to make. That's what those contracts are. So they're implied contracts, and they can be challenged and they can be destroyed. But when you talk about a so-called government agent or officer, they're all required to take an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And from the Constitution comes the legislator. And from the legislator, supposedly, or should come all the acts and policies and everything else, which means all these officers and agents of the federal government, the representatives and all of that, they all are required by their oath, which is the evidence of the contract, to be held under the provisions of the Constitution, and that's all the forms of law. So that's just kind of how that works. And when they're trying to accuse you of committing the so-called statutory crime legislated by their laws, your question back is, by what authority? Or you issue a writ of quo warranto, saying that you guys got to prove that you're not perpetuating color of law, because I have the proof that you're bound by the law. And if I don't have the proof, then you're impersonating an officer and you don't have a contract with me. Or if I'm wrong, then you must produce a contract showing that where I'm bound to those provisions. And then that's when they start trying to question you. Well, are you a resident? So whenever you take that position, look out for the adhesion contracts. Look out for the presumptions, so presumptions can be thrown your way to get you to acquiesce. But see, in reality, when these things are taking place, someone has already breached their obligation. Someone is already committing treason, because with any type of trust, to figure out if things are operating in the right direction, you only have to look at the preamble. You look at the intent, and the intent of the constitutional contract trust is to reaffirm and to acknowledge unalienable universal principles. And when you read through the Constitution, and you can look at the relevant, I'm going to attach a document with some good references of what I'm saying. But when you read through the Constitution, it is set up in such a way that the officers and the employees, their duties and their responsibility is to only affirm and secure. And when I say secure, I don't mean secure it as in the form of taking it away from you, but to enforce the protections of and to enforce the protection of your unalienable rights. That's it. It doesn't grant them any authority to prevent you from acquiring wealth. It doesn't allow them to prevent you from doing anything other than trespassing on someone else's unalienable rights. So therefore, anything else that you're doing is your right to do so. And any officer or employee or agent that is bound to the federal Constitution cannot prevent you from exercising any of your rights to do anything, even to make money. I didn't say chase money, I said make it, to create it, right? Unless there's something specific in the Constitution that grants them that authority. And that's why I say when anyone that's bound to the Constitution is trying to assert their position over any of your unalienable rights, which is whatever you want to do, then you need to ask them by what authority. And that's where your writ of quo warranto and proof of claim and all those different things come into effect. Oh, and I had to add this part on the end because I almost forgot. One of the, I did present the disposition. I showed you the problem that we present to ourselves by attaching to the Constitution under the 14th Amendment as a part of the property, right? And, you know, some may say, well, we're not a part of the 14th Amendment. We are part of the we, the people. Well, that is, be it as it may, I don't think others are going to recognize you as part of we, the people, because you didn't have the status of the we, the people during the time in which it was written. However, under Article 6, which applies to the trustees and the federal government, um, you also are partial to the agreement because that is where it acknowledges that the treaties that have been established with your ancestors, with your people, with your lineage, those treaties are still valid and enforceable against the United States. And this is why you have to look at the mandate that Noble Drew Ali gave for you to enforce the Constitution for the United States. Because if someone has been given the authority to run this government and they're not running it in accordance with the guidelines that were agreed upon, including the treaties, which is clearly expressed in Article 6 for those that have legal competency to read and understand, then you will know that, okay, this is why the Constitution is important to me, and knowing who I am is important because I have a mandate to enforce this agreement, right? I have an obligation to set things right and not turn the other way or say this is too difficult or I'm too busy to comprehend and understand it. Because everything I'm talking about applies to the Asiatic, so-called African American people that do not know who they are and refuse to look in the mirror. Peace.